There are plenty of games scarier than Five Nights at Freddy's. Resident Evil, Dead Space, Alien Isolation, and these games usually rely on more unique forms of horror. Either an unstoppable abomination is hunting you down, to which you are given two ways to fight back. Either you run away, or you stun it and run away, or it's actually the setting of the game itself. Lost in the woods at dark, being the lone survivor trapped with a bloodthirsty alien in the void of space with no one to help. You get the idea. Five Nights at Freddy's, however, relies on more simplistic methods to get that scare out of you, and by this I mean jump scares. There's nothing really too scary about where the game takes place, or even the things that are hunting you down. I mean, it's a teddy bear. So, what makes these games scary? It's no surprise that most of the jump in jump scares comes from the sounds that are played when it happens, but there is another thing that keeps the tension in the atmosphere, and that is the dark, twisted lore behind Five Nights at Freddy's. Let's quickly go through the generalized lore of each game to make sense of what we have so far. In Five Nights at Freddy's 1, you played as a security guard hired to work the night shift at an old decaying children's entertainment restaurant. The room you are assigned to has two mechanical doors on either side, a set of lights on each door. You have limited power, and the only companion you are given to help you through the nights is Phone Guy, a mysterious man who calls at the beginning of every night and helps you by giving you important information about the animatronics. There are 4 animatronics trying to hunt you down. Now let's stop and see what we actually have here in terms of horror. Doors, lights, cameras, animal robots. So yeah, not much. Even the death screen is just the animatronics violently shaking your screen or jumping towards you before it cuts. Who knows what happens after the screen cuts? Do they kill you? Do they hug you? Do they spank you? We never get to find out. Other games utilize this method of leaving the rest up to your imagination because it's quite a powerful tool to fill in the gaps. Everyone has their own definition of violence and horror and the different thresholds for it, so leaving it up to the imagination of the individual satisfies everyone. In games like The Last of Us, the screen cuts to black right before the main character is either ripped in half or right before he gets all too familiar with what the Bite of 87 actually was. But in these situations, the last thing we see is a horrifying mutant zombie attempting to murder the characters. All we see in Five Nights at Freddy's is big robot toys, and then those robot toys jump at you if you don't monitor them. So, on paper, not much to go on in terms of horror. What we do know from this game is that there was an incident known as the Bite of 87.
Was that the Bite of 87?
Briefly mentioned by Phone Guy, in which an animatronic supposedly attacked a person at a restaurant, and the injury resulted in the person losing their frontal lobe. We also come to know of an incident known as the Missing Children's Incident, from posters on the walls, which you can see from the cameras, where 5 children were lured by an unknown man in a costume and presumably murdered and stuffed inside the animatronics. These hidden or ambiguous pieces of information are the foundations on which the games will utilize to build the lore and create a sense of horror around the games and the animatronics. Next in the series, we have Five Nights at Freddy's 2, which was a prequel to Five Nights at Freddy's 1. It gives more information on the missing children's incident and is the first time we are introduced to the Purple Guy, who we later come to know is the man responsible behind the murdering of the children. The Purple Man was already responsible for murdering a child prior to the 5, this child being the daughter of Henry. She would go on to possess the puppet, and would help the other 5 children to possess the animatronic suits. This game also shows us that this is roughly the same time when the Bite of 87 takes place. So we've started to build on the lore here, and things are being told more explicitly to the player. Murdered children, mysterious man, spirits haunting the animatronics. Things are starting to get a bit creepier, and playing the game now, whilst knowing why the animatronics are hunting you down, or the events that transpired in the pizzeria that you are working in, start to get a bit unsettling. Five Nights at Freddy's 3 revolves around the continued story of the Purple Guy, who we now know is William Afton. He goes back to the pizzeria from Five Nights at Freddy's 1 to dismantle the suits, only to be terrorized by the souls of his victims. He hides inside an old spring bunny, the same suit he used to commit the crimes. But the suit mechanism fails, and he is crushed inside. This is also believed to be the time when the 5 children possessing the animatronics are freed, and their souls now move on from the living world. 30 years later, the suit was found by people looking to open a new horror attraction based on the urban legend surrounding Freddys, and this is where the events of the third game take place. Where Springtrap, who is William Afton in the decaying bunny suit, is trying to kill you, the security guard. At the end of the game, we see that the building caught fire, and it is assumed that Springtrap escaped. Things are really starting to get weird now, and you find yourself asking multiple times, this game is targeted towards children? Mr. Afton here becomes human mush after he's impaled, crushed, and slowly wrangled to death in the same animatronic suit he used to lure and kill 5 children in, by the spirits of those children. It's safe to say at this point that the lore is very gruesome, creepy, and outright scary. Five Nights at Freddy's 4, in my opinion, is the scariest game out of all of them. I mean, look at these things. It's nightmare fuel. Now the lore behind Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is very confusing, and there are unconfirmed theories all over the internet. But from what I understand, you are supposedly playing as a young Michael Afton, surviving the nights in your bedroom as you are hunted down by the nightmare animatronics. It's theorized that this is all possibly a dream during the events of Five Nights at Freddy's 1.
But this is largely speculation, as it also could be a punishment for Michael Afton by William Afton, his father, for what he did to the bite victim, as we later come to find out in Five Nights at Freddy's 4 that the older brother of the bite victim is none other than Michael.
Bite victim is bullied by his older brother constantly because of his fear of the animatronics, and following the days of his birthday party, we see the mental torture that the child goes through, with his brother dressing up as the mascot and trying to scare him. Eventually, on the day of his birthday, his brother and friends try to prank him by carrying him over to the mouth of Fredbear and put his head inside. The animatronic's mouth closes with the bite victim's head inside, crushing the boy to his death. This incident later became known as the Bite of 83. Children being bullied, skulls being crushed to death, traumatic childhoods, mental issues, the lore is getting out of hand now. Playing these games in the moment is scary, yes. These figures look menacing, they jump at you with loud noises, but what keeps you coming back to play these games? At its core, Five Nights at Freddy's 1 all the way to number 4 are all the exact same. The fundamentals are all the same in the sense that you have 2 doors on either side. You have to keep monitoring to stop the monsters or animatronics from jumping at you. It's the lore that keeps you coming back, and it's the lore that keeps the atmosphere of these games tense. Knowing who you as the player could be playing as and why these animatronics are hunting you down makes the gameplay so much more terrifying. And the following games only get worse. They revolve around the continued story of the Aftons and involves the scooping of insides, rotting corpses, turning purple, and yeah. The target demographic for this is children, by the way. But that's the point. The lore is pretty messed up, but Scott has realized that if he makes an interesting enough game with basic horror concepts, interesting enough for people to have a go at, he can use the lore and expand on the events surrounding the games to enhance the horror and the atmosphere. This contradicts more mainstream horror games like Resident Evil and The Last of Us, or Alien Isolation, that don't have much lore surrounding the games, and the story you get in the game is the story that the developers wanted you to see. If they do include lore, they act as little tidbits of extra information rather than developing the story as a whole or allowing the community to make their own theories. More and more indie games are starting to do this, and it leaves space for crazy, wacky theories that all help with the game's popularity, and this is the key in the success of Five Nights at Freddy's. If you ask me, it's gotten to a point where MatPat and his game theory channel not only provide popularity for the FNAF games, but he's sometimes writing the future of the FNAF games and lore for Scott. Granted, it's not always accurate, and he's been wrong here and there, but more times than not, his theories turn out to be true. It could be that, or it could be that Scott is using those theories since they're actually good. He's essentially doing Scott's job for him. The lore expands, more games are released, and game theory makes 400 videos on who the bite victim can't be and why the bite of 87 is the most important thing going on in their life right now.
Was that the White River Eating Store?
At the same time, the horror behind the games expands, since you, the player, despite all your efforts to ignore it, ultimately know the secrets behind the dark, demonic, possessed animatronics wanting to hunt you down. The lore provides horror, it provides story, and it provides exposure in terms of popularity. FNAF is a crazy, crazy game. What started off as a small indie game has now transformed into an empire, with games, books, comics, movies, and it's all thanks to the lore. We've covered how it enhances horror in the games and how it's helped with the game's popularity. If you enjoyed the videos, please leave a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.